Hello and welcome back to the Rams Talk podcast preview show. It's me again. This doesn't usually happen, but back-to-back preview episodes for me, and I've got a really good guest for you today. We're previewing Carlisle United away, and I'm joined by Lee Rooney from the Brunton Bugle. How are you, Lee?
I'm not too bad. Enjoying life back in League One after just under a decade away. So it's been a steady start for us, but I think we're generally happy with how things have gone so far.
Good stuff, good stuff. And I have to ask you before we get going, can you explain the podcast name?
So yeah, the Brunton Bugle. So we did a podcast, me and a couple of mates, about 5-6 years ago, and it lasted a few episodes. It was very cumbersome to put together, and it was we used to record it on match days, and it was too much work. And then when all the lockdowns started with COVID, we decided, well, me and a few mates were like, well, why don't we put something together? I live in Liverpool. One of the lads lives in Formby near Liverpool, and the other lad lives in Carlisle. We're like, well, let's try to do something. And we're trying to think of names. And Dan, who's on our pod, said, well, there used to be a newspaper that the club did in the early 90s called the Brunton Bugle. And I think it would come out on a match day or something. So I was like, that's brilliant. Bit of alliteration, it's different names to what you normally expect to get. Went for the Brunton Bugle. And we've been going for 3 or 4 seasons now. So it's all good.
Good to hear. Great to hear. So, got a few questions for you, Lee. And yeah, it's the same questions we ask every week. So I'm sure people listening know what I'm going to say already. But to kick us off, I mean, how many games in now? 8 games in. How would you sum up the season so far for Carlisle?
Okay. It's simple as that. People might look and think, oh, they've not had the best of start. They're right down near the teams that are struggling at the bottom. But we're quite realistic. I think our fan base, and that we know that budget-wise, we've probably got one of, if not the smallest budget in the division. We got promoted from League 2 last season with a bottom 6 budget. I think it was a bottom 8 budget. So that shows, the amazing work that Paul Simpson's done, which I'm sure you can ask me about him in a little bit. And I think we look and think, with the recruitment we're able to do, we managed to keep hold of most of our defence and midfield, and we're pretty happy with that because they were pretty good last season. We've had to make some changes in attack and refresh things up a little bit there, and we've struggled maybe to find our feet and find goals at first. But a few games in now, we're starting to show we can score goals and cause team problems. And we kept hold of Owen Moxon, which was a massive thing for us because he was amazing last season in League 2. What a star he was! But generally, we're looking and we're thinking, actually, no one's battered us. No one's come and steamrolled us. I mean, against Stevenage, you maybe argue they dominate chances and our goalkeeper was man of the match that day. But even then, we still had a few chances ourselves. And Wigan were the nearest team we got to a team battering us. In first half, they were unreal. And we're like, wow, this is the best team we've seen in a league fixture for probably a decade. They played some unbelievable football. But second half, we just made it into a fight. It's like, right, you know what? We're going to take the game to you. We're going to have a real go here, change things up a little bit. And actually, we were probably marginally the better side in the second half, and we got a draw from it. So we're looking at thinking we can see it's a much tougher test at League 1 level than it was at League 2. But on the flip side, we're coping okay with it so far. And I think at the end of the day, our aim this season is to stay up, and that's it really, because we've got promoted probably 1 or 2 seasons ahead of schedule under Simpson. So to get up where we are now, great. Let's just take the opportunity, keep ourselves in the division and build from there, because there's potentially some very good news coming off the field soon about a takeover as well. So things are looking bright for us. It's just a case of, right, let's not mess up this opportunity of playing third tier football and keep ourselves up there and build from there.
Well, exactly. And just want to test your memory here. Do you remember the last time our 2 teams played against each other?
It was that League Cup game in 2017. 2016?
No, yeah.
Or maybe then. No, in fact, it might be 2015, actually. I remember because I live in Liverpool and I drove over that game. It was an August night, and it's one of the hottest I've been at a football game. It was still like 25 degrees when the penalty shootout happened at 10:30. It was ridiculous. Because I remember we equalised with pretty much the last kick of the game. I think it was Mike Jones scored a long ranger past Scott Carson. So, I mean, that's going back a bit now, isn't it, when you think about that? So, yeah, I remember that game because you were probably comfortably the better side in it, but yet we still somehow managed to nick it to penalties. And there was a discussion we had after the game, I remember, because I think the referee messed things up with the shootout. We should have been able to withdraw one of our players from the shootout because one of your players went off injured and didn't come back on for the shootout, but for some reason we didn't. So it was a weird one. I think it was a mistake that the referee had made. If you go back and look at it, I'm sure that's what happened. But I remember it being an epic shootout as well. And driving back up the M6, we were sweating like mad. It was so warm at that time, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember it well. I was lucky enough to speak to Derby's owner David Clowes, and he was reminiscing about that day as well. It's one of those that sticks in the memory. I think it was Bradley Johnson that was injured and didn't take the penalty.
Yes, it was. You're right.
Yeah. So there we go. Tested both of our memories there.
Exactly.
So I guess I've got to come to you about the ex-Derby players, haven't I?
Yeah.
Callum Guy, he always looked brilliant in our academy, never really got a chance in the first team. And then Luke Plange, who sort of, he didn't come through our academy, but we signed him from Arsenal as a youngster, broke straight into the first team and had a decent sort of end to the season in our administration season. How would you sum up their time at Carlisle?
Well, I'll start with Luke Plange first because there's not as much to say about him because he's only just signed for us in the summer on loan from Crystal Palace. And there was a little bit of disappointment when he signed because we'd had a lad on loan from Crystal Palace last season called J.K. Gordon, who's at Cambridge United now. And he looked a real talent. He took his while to find his feet and he dropped out the team for a little bit. But when he came back in, he looked really, really good and strong. And, he was a big player for us in our playoff push. And we were kind of hoping, maybe we'd get him back on loan. And he was on the Palace bench for the first few games. So it's kind of like, maybe that's why we missed out. So when he went to Cambridge, it's kind of like, all right, so we ended up with the one they didn't want in the end. We got Luke Plange. But I think the problem is these days you get opinions of fans on the internet, don't they tell you how terrible a player is. And Plange didn't have the best of times at Lincoln City last season on loan. I think it's fair to say their fans didn't rate him at all. Funny enough, he goes and scores against them in the weekend, which was quite funny. But first couple of games, you're thinking like, I can see a little bit of what is good about him. But he was a bit frustrating. He looked like an academy player. One is all the nice touches and everything, but he's not quite smart enough to know you haven't got that time in the ball. You're going to get bullied off the ball a lot. And he struggled a bit. And funny enough, that game against Wigan I mentioned earlier, he came on as a sub in that game and he helped change the game because he held onto the ball well and he used it really well. And you're like, okay, maybe there's a play here. And actually, when he's come into the team recently, he's looked actually quite good. And you think, okay, maybe there actually is a half decent player. I'm not sure he's going to score many goals for us, but his work rate's pretty good. He actually has got quite a nice touch him and he plays the ball quite nicely. But yeah, whether he'll still stay beyond January, because we've only got him on loan until then, I don't know. But he's shown enough that he's a fairly useful player. And, his teammates seem to like him. They really rallied around him when he was struggling a bit and he's done really well at the weekend. So, yeah, fairly decent player. Callum Guy, great player. We signed him from, was it Blackpool, I think, in just before all the COVID things kicked off. First few games, we've got a decent player here. He got quite a bad knee injury, but then he was back in time for the following season, and he was fantastic. We missed on the playoffs that season, the COVID season, because we had a run where we had to play Saturday, Tuesday, 12 weeks in a row, and it just crippled us. And we went from top of the league down to about 10th. Yeah. Just because and Chris Beach, our manager, just couldn't recover from that. He basically ended up getting sacked a few months into the next season because he just didn't know how to get us out of a rut. And Callum was a fantastic midfielder, fairly decent set piece on him for corners and that kind of thing. But his ability to screen, the back line as well and cover them. And he's a pretty decent passer of the ball. One of my mates nicknamed him Ungilo Kante because he was that good at doing that kind of job. But he, fantastic player. And actually massive last season in terms of how well we were able to be, because Owen Moxon's probably our star player in midfield. But he's our star player because Callum Guy does the dirty work and he does the covering and he will run all day. Brilliant player. He made his 150th appearance for us at the weekend. He first couple of seasons he didn't score at all for us, and I think he only had one career goal before that. And then last season, I think he was having his own goal of the season competition. I think he scored about 3 or 4 goals from long range. Yeah. Just out of nowhere, he just developed this ability to actually score a goal from distance. So really improved in terms of that. But he's a big fan favourite as well. You probably saw him the other week. He got the man of the match award in our win against Shrewsbury. And some of these online social media accounts, the banter accounts, they all think, Carlisle's man of the match gets a curry or gets a bowler pasta. They don't. All the players get that bowler pasta. They just take a photo with the man of the match to give the local company or pub or
Yeah.
curry house, whatever that does it, a bit of promotion. And he didn't obviously have a fork on him at the time, so he there dipping his hand into this bowl, metal tray of pasta to eat it. So he got a bit of stick for that. But yeah, he's been a fantastic player for us as Callum, and he's I think he's tied down now for another 2 or 3 seasons, I think, or maybe 2 seasons with an option. So he was captain for a season, and he struggled a bit in the season where he was captain, and he got taken off him, and it's not really affected him in terms of he didn't react badly to it at all. In fact, it helped him. He was so much better player once he had that taken off him, and yeah, really, really good player, and one that I'm sure will play a big part of the weekend, definitely against you guys.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sure he will. And just on that picture, it gives me the vibes of Connor Salmon holding that pizza. I can't remember who he was playing for at the time. But yeah, that picture of him man of the match and he's got his pizza, which is always a good one to look back on. And I guess before we get on to the rest of the players, just want to talk about your manager, Paul Simpson. I mean, he had some good times at Derby, Paul Simpson. I think I wouldn't put him down as a legend, but I'd certainly say that he's someone that Derby fans really, really like.
Yeah.
We were all rooting for you guys last season. Simo, he's I guess you could even say he's one of our own a little bit. I know it's maybe not, but to some Derby fans, he really is one of our own. So yeah, talk us through his appointment and what he's done to change Carlisle into a League One team.
Oh, he's a legend. He just is a club legend now. There's a strong argument. He's up there with Alan Ashman and Bob Stoker as one of our greatest ever managers, basically. You know, he's 2 spells now, 3 promotions. We'll tell you about when he came in. So he came in last season. So season before. So we had Chris Beach at the start of last season. And as I mentioned before, he got sacked. There was a lot of discussion about who was going to replace him. And our director of football at the time, the brother of Dean Holsworth, I don't mention his name because he's that disliked at Carlisle, but he basically ended up appointing a guy called Keith Millen, who was his former teammate at Watford. He claims that he hadn't been spoken to him for years. So it was just a coincidence that. But he was just dreadful. Nice bloke, but just not up to being a manager at all. He hadn't been a manager for like 10 seasons, I think. At Bristol City was the last place he'd been a manager. So he just couldn't get a grip of things. We had a game in February against Swindon Town, and Swindon Town were flying at the top of League Two. And they had a guy playing for them called Harry McCurdy. I'm sure you'll have heard of Harry McCurdy. Most low league fans have, because he's basically opposition fan hates him. We hate him more because he used to play for us. We had him for a season, and he was really good, actually. He scored 11 goals from 33 games on the wing. This was the season that was curtailed by COVID. And we let him go, which probably tells you all you need to know about what he's like off the pitch. And, he was just not worth the hassle in the slightest. And he would argue with fans. He'd start arguments in games. Like, he scored a late winner against Walsall, I think, and refused to celebrate with our fans, even though we're all going mad and like cheering. It's like, he's such an absolute idiot. But anyway, he ran riot that day. It was one of the most toxic atmospheres I've ever been in a football game. He was just taking the mickey. He scored. He set the other 2 up, celebrating in front of our fans, and he got some abuse, but so did Keith Millen. He was getting so much stick from our fans. It was unbelievable. So, it was kind of after that game, I think the owners kind of realised, like, we can't carry on like this because we're bottom of the league and really struggling. And I think the only man they could get in that the fans would instantly get behind was Simo. And they went to him, and Simo said, I'll come back as long as you do it properly and you sack him first. I don't want this being sorted behind his back. Well, I said, you sort it out with him and then come back to me and we'll talk. And apparently as soon as they'd done it, he said, right, I'll do a deal to the end of the season. And I think he won 5 of his opening 6 games and basically guaranteed safety pretty much in that first month. The turnaround in the performances of some of the players who'd struggled was unbelievable. And then the following season, I think we all just sort of hoped maybe mid-table, maybe just sneak into the playoffs. As it was, we probably could have got top 3 if we hadn't had a couple of injuries at one point. And what he's done, because he's a local lad, because he's a Carlisle lad, he gets it.
Yeah.
And he's got that real connection, and he's got credit in the bank from the first time around, even though he left to go to Preston, and that annoyed some of our fans back then. But most of them have got over it now because he kept us up in what he's done last season. And yeah, he's managed to do something I don't think anyone else could have done, which is not only do well with the team, but managed to almost get the fans to forget about the fact that we have some owners that they're not bad people, but they're very grey and old and stale, and they need something refreshing there, something to refresh things at the top. And A lot of our fans didn't like them, though. They were quite vitriolic towards them, and they kind of almost forgot because Simmer's done such a good job. And, we're getting 5-figure crowds for the first time in years for league games, and we'll have a 5-figure crowd again at the weekend, guaranteed. And he's given us a club to believe in, and I think that's genuinely probably had an impact in terms of attracting this outside investment for the potential takeover from the Piatic family from America, who are involved with the Jacksonville Jaguars and sponsorship and stuff. And I think they've met Simo. They've been really impressed with him. And yeah, the difference he's made has been unbelievable. And look, he's pretty much guaranteed the job as long as he wants, pretty much, because the fans love him. And, if we got relegated this season, I don't think he'd lose his job. I think most fans would stick by him and say, let's have another go again. That's how much they love him. And like you'll see banners up for him at the game at the weekend and stuff like that. So he's unbelievable guy. And yeah, I mean, the 2 promotions he got first time round were enough to make him a legend, but to do it the second time round as well just tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of Derby fans listening will appreciate that a lot. But right, let's get back onto the team. So you've mentioned a couple of players already. I've just got FOTMob up in front of me, and I'm just looking at your top 3 players. Now, we've spoken quite a lot about Callum Guy. He's there in second. But the top player that you've got is a player you've mentioned 2 or 3 times already, and that's Owen Moxon. Yes. I mean, he plays central midfield. He's got 2 goals, 2 assists already this season. What's he like? What sort of player is he?
Box-to-box midfielder. We signed him from Annan Athletic. He's a Carlisle lad again, so he was playing just over the board with Annan Athletic in Scottish League 2. He was in our academy until he was 16, and we let him go. He went to Queen of the South, had a few years there, didn't really make it there. Went to Annan, did fairly well. Annan were managed by a guy called Peter Murphy, who's our record outfield appearance holder, and he played under Simpson, funny enough. So when Simo came back, he contacted Simo and said, look, we've got this lad in midfield. He's been fantastic for us this season. There's championship clubs watching him. But if you guys come in, he'll sign for you because he wants to play football and he wants to play for his hometown club, at least, for a season at the very least.
Yeah.
So I went and watched him in one game and said, yeah, we're signing him. Like pretty much, I think he went to one of his playoff games and said, look, I'm coming to watch your playoff game because they played in the playoffs and in that season. Don't worry about it. We'll chat, a week after. Just do what you normally do. And he was brilliant. And we all thought, he'll take a bit of time to settle in, but he took to playing in professional football like a duck to water. He was working as a UPS driver when he was at Annan, so he had to give that job up to come and play full time for us. And
I'm sure he's gutted.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he's devastated. But yeah, he's been to make that step up to the full time training, and it didn't look a struggle for him at all. And he got 6 goals and 17 assists last season, I think.
Wow.
He was Scottish. No, sorry, not Scottish. He was in the League 2 Team of the Year. I think he came second to Sam Hoskins at Northampton for the 4-4-2, the EFL League 2 Player of the Season. So, yeah, most opposition clubs were all raving about him as well. He's got a great long shot. I mean, brilliant corners and free kicks and set pieces. The thing about him as well, because you think, he's attacking player, flair player, go forward. I think he was near enough top for tackles in League 2 as well last season. He can win the ball back really well. He's got this ability to sort of turn and hold off a player and bring the ball forward. There was one assist in particular. My favourite was our the second goal against Barrow for Joe Garner. He plays this defence spitting pass that you think, how on earth has he spotted Garner through with that pass there? Unbelievable ball. But yeah, he's, our fans will sing, when Moxon is one of our own at the weekend. He is a massive player for us. I think we're probably going to struggle to keep hold of him. I'm hoping this takeover investment might give us a little bit more money to convince him to stay. But at the moment, he's supposed to be out of contract next summer. There's some talk that there might be a clause in there. If he plays so many games, we can extend it for another season. But he's going to have clubs interested in him. He's maybe not settled into League 2 quite as quickly just yet, but he's doing pretty well, and he copes with the physical side of it really well as well. So, yeah, massive player for us last season, and keeping hold of him. I mean, keeping hold of him beyond the August window was a real achievement because Blackpool made a £250,000 offer, which we sort of laughed off and said, you're taking the mickey. No way we'd let him go for that. And I think we've basically decided, look, we'd rather he kept him for the season than let him go for any sort of fee, unless it's a really stupid, like with a 7-figure fee, you'd have to think about it. But for that, for £250,000, it just wasn't worth it because he's the kind of player who can help keep us up.
Well, exactly, and staying up would be worth much more than that. So, that's a really good point. And if you're going to highlight one player as sort of the danger man, we'll take Luke Plange out of the equation. Who would you pick?
It's a good question. I think it's hard to pick one because I kind of want to pick two. So I'm going to, because I want to put an attacker and a defender. So in attack, Sean Maguire. So Sean Maguire, you've probably seen him play for Coventry and Preston and a few others. We were quite surprised we got him in the summer. We've only got him on a 1-year deal. And I think the hope is if he does fairly well, we might be able to extend that because he's had a few injury issues. But he was fantastic, really. He's now he's found his feet and found a bit of fitness because he came a little bit late in pre-season. Looks technically so good. He's good on the ball. He's got one goal, but he practically got another, but it was given as an own goal against Shrewsbury. But yeah, he looks a really good player, and he's more of a second striker, I think. So we're kind of hoping we get some up there playing with him. And Planges at the moment, we've got Joe Garner who comes off the bench and replaces him as well. So we've got options there, but Maguire looks a real find. I'd say our longest serving players, if one I'd pick out, John Mellish. Now, John's an interesting story as well. So John, we signed him in 2019 from Gateshead in the National League, and he'd just been voted the best young player in the National League when we signed him as a centre-back. For is it, about 20, 21, I think he was.
Yeah.
Upcoming player. In fact, he might have even been 19. But anyway, he's a young player, almost one for the future, but a decent player in either way. He struggled to get in the team a bit. I think he found Lee too a bit of a tough one at first. Stephen Presley was our manager, then got sacked, and then we replaced him with Chris Beach. Chris Beach was going to let him go as a defender within the season, but then we played a reserve game against Kendall Town, and he thought, I'm going to try him in midfield. He's quite bustling. He gets about a bit. He's got a bit of energy about him. He scored a hat-trick against Kendall in the friendly in midfield, and then he played against Blackpool in another one. I think he scored another hat-trick. So he basically said to him, you're going to play in midfield at the weekend against Crawley in League Two. And he's like, oh, okay. Went in, India, okay. Now that season got curtailed by COVID, but he got a new deal as a midfielder. The following season, he scored 17 goals from midfield.
Wow.
And he's not the most technically gifted player in the world, John, but he will run all day. He will cause chaos, and he gets in the right places. He's got pretty decent finishing as well. So he had a great season for midfield. The following season, we struggled at the start. We didn't really have any strikers. We actually played him up front for a couple of games because we're like, we just need someone up there. And he scored a couple of goals playing up there. And then Miller loses his job after Beach had lost his job. And Paul Simpson comes in his first training session, takes one look at John and says, now you're going to go back in defence, mate. We're going to go to free at the back and you're going to play on the left side of that back three. But I've seen your ability in terms of running with the ball and real power and pace, a little bit of pace as well. You can get forward when you want because Callum Guy will drop in and cover or Moxon will drop in and cover. So basically, John Mellish is, as Mike on our pod describes him, a box-to-box defender because he will literally, you probably see him as much in attack as you will in defence. He's been a little bit more reined in on that this season, to be fair, because we're playing better teams, but he's still doing it occasionally. And for home games particularly, you'll probably see him doing a bit more. So he loves bombing up and down the pitch. He causes chaos. The great thing about him as well is if we play with Gibson as one of our free midfielders, Gibson's also a winger you can play there as well. We have the ability to switch to 4-3-3 during the game because you just push John into midfield and say, right, go in there and just win the ball, cause a bit of problems. Technically, he's got a lot better than he was at the start as well. So he's a massive fan's favourite because he's longest serving, runs all day, works his backside off, and he loves winding up opposition fans and players as well. There's a great video from when we scored a 96-minute winner against Swindon last season away. And it was Edmonton that scored it. But as the players are running over to celebrate our fans, John Mellish runs across and slats 3 different Swindon players on the back of the head as he's running to celebrate with our fans. And he also, when he scored his penalty at Wembley in the playoff final, he just, typical John Mellish, just hammered the ball as hard as he could. And then basically turned to a Stockport fan who'd clearly been giving him stick behind the goal and told him where to go. So yeah, he's a character and he's funny, but I don't want to talk too much about him more, but his mum's also on Twitter and his mum is a typical embarrassing mum. Gives him stick all day on Twitter, so like calling him a prat and stuff like that. So, but it's all like in jest, basically. But yeah, John's a massive fan's favorite, and you'll probably see the weekend. He will run all day. He's one of those players who probably won't work at many other clubs, but he's quite happy here because he knows the fans like him and we love what he does, and we know what he can do. So he's one. I think the only club he'd probably go to would be Sunderland because he's a big Sunderland fan. But bar that, I think he'd probably stay with us quite a few years, hopefully.
That's really interesting. And I guess to look at the team as a whole then, what sort of shape do you shape up with? I know you mentioned 3 at the back. We play a 3 at the back as well, and it's horrible. What's yours like?
Yeah, we played 3 at the back pretty much since Simpson came, and he tried 4-3-3 in a couple of games at the start of the season. It just didn't quite work. As I mentioned, we got 2 wing backs. We got Jack Arm, who's I think probably second longest serving player after Mellish, who he's been fantastic. I think he's played about 70 odd games in a row now. I think he'll get up and down all day. And Finn Back on the other side, who's on loan from Nottingham Forest, whose surname might sound familiar because his dad is Neil Back, who won the Rugby Union World Cup with England in 2003. It's great because his dad's always tweeting about us and stuff like. He seems to really, because he was on loan last season as well. Was Finn, and he's fantastic attitude. He missed a lot last season because of injury, but he was still coming up and watching the team and stuff. So he really bought into it. So yeah, they get up and down quite a lot. But as I mentioned, John Mellish will just go forward and we practically be coming back 4 at times when he does. And Callum Guy will drop deep and Moxon will sort of screen up and down the pitch. And Gibson, for someone who's a winger, he'll nick the ball all day in attack. You know, he's got this ability to win the ball and he's really good and creative with the ball at his feet. The problem we've had is we didn't really have a target man this summer. And we were kind of hoping Ryan Edmondson would step up and become that because he showed signs of it last season. But he's really struggled for form at the start of the season. He really hasn't found his feet yet. So we're kind of hoping he's been gifted an opportunity because we signed JJ Coyote on loan from Rotherham for his 3rd loan spell with us on deadline day. We thought, great, we finally got the target man we want. He's a big, strong lad, 6'5". We know how good he is from his previous 2 spells. Unfortunately, he dislocated his shoulder on his debut and we didn't know he had. So he played against Stevenage with dislocated shoulder. It's only because the pain was getting worse the day after Stevenage. They went and checked and said, yeah, you dislocated shoulder. And he went back in. But when it did that, it tore some of the ligaments in there. So you're going to have to have an operation. So he's out for 12 weeks. So frustrating. So Edmonton's been handed a bit of a lifeline there to potentially get back in the team. He's on the bench at the moment, but he's a big 6'3", 6'4" striker. So you kind of hope he'll be able to do that. But yeah, we can be direct when we want. But actually, when we get into the final third, we'll play some quite nice football. We'll play quite well. So our fans don't mind it. It's one of those ones, I think, back in the day, our fans were saying, oh, go back to back 4, get some wingers on the pitch. But problem is, if you play 4-3-3, people accuse you of playing 4-5-1 a lot of the time when you're not. Whereas with the 3-5-2, it's a very clear back 3 for us with Mellish obviously getting forward. And the wing backs do get forward quite a lot. Similar likes that. So yeah, it's quite well liked with our fans. We don't really mind it. It gets the best out of the players we've got.
Yeah.
But, we have that ability, like I said, to switch to 4-3-3 during the game if we need to.
Yeah, and when you build a team to play a system, it does tend to work, unless it's Derby, apparently. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the goods. You've talked about some of the best players. What are the biggest weaknesses? What are the areas of the game that you think you could work on?
I think the goal scoring was the weakness at the start of the season. Last season we scored quite a few goals, but we were struggling at the start of the season to really. We were still creating chances, but we just weren't. They weren't being brave enough with the ball sometimes and taking those opportunities. But that started to improve in recent games. I think a bit more belief sometimes as well. I think too many of our players are a little bit. I don't want to say awestruck, but they're maybe a little bit struggling to realise you're playing at League One level now.
Yeah,
there's one young lad called Taylor Charles, we all on our pod rate really highly. And the couple of games he's come in off the bench for, he's been caught in possession like pretty much straight away. And it's kind of like, you've got to get up to the speed of the game really quickly in these games now. It's not as easy as it was maybe in League Two sometimes. So sometimes, maybe not getting up to the pace of the game. And yeah, there's still a little bit of a question in goalkeeping wise. We had Thomas Holy was first choice at the start of the season. Thomas is 6'9".
Wow.
Big Czech goalkeeper.
That's excessive.
Tallest player in the league. But the great thing about having him in the team was teams just didn't really score set pieces against us because he couldn't.
I'm not surprised.
Or punch. And he's got a pretty decent kick on him as well. So generally you could play back to him and he kicked it pretty well. Simo, there's rumours that Simo wasn't really that convinced by him last season at times. So we signed Jocko Anderson on loan from Reading. And he came in for the game against Port Vale and he had an absolute stinker in that game with well, not stinker, to be fair, I'm being a bit harsh there, but he made an absolute aberration on throwing back to him basically. He tried to control it, messed it up and gave away a penalty and it was the only goal of the game. But he picked up in the last couple of games and he was man of the match against Stevenage. He was excellent. And against Lincoln, he did fairly well as well. So we're hoping that maybe he'll settle down and show what he's capable of now. But yeah, I kind of feel we're pretty strong defensively. And like I said, no one's really outplayed us. but we just need a little bit more belief from the players. I think is what we need, and taking those chances when we're attacking. You get away with it in League Two a little bit more. You don't at this level. There is a clear step up. You'd notice that straight away.
Yeah. There's some big teams in this league, so yeah, you can imagine. And one final thing before I ask you for your score prediction: are there any Derby players that you're worried about facing?
Can I read your squad list out? I haven't really had a chance to look in detail. Waghorn's one that always worries me. I'm pretty sure he scored a hat-trick against us for Leicester or someone, I think, a few years back. He's a really good player. I really like him. I'm going to have to load your squad up now because I was looking at it before and there was some, I was thinking, God, this is going to be tough at the weekend. I know you guys haven't started the season particularly well, I suppose, but I'm pretty sure you'll find your feet quickly enough. Looking through, I mean, Conor Hourihane, having a player like that.
Yeah,
I suppose he fitness issues there. There you go. Yeah, he's great player at this level, you'd think. And Mendes Lang as well, I suppose, is another one who've always really liked. Just the attacking options I'm looking at here. Well, it's a little bit.
Would it surprise you if I said we're rubbish up top?
Well, you look at the names; they're all big names there, so it's kind of a little bit of a surprise to hear that. But yeah, look, there's this quality throughout that squad, and just to be competing against teams again at this level is really, really pleasing for us. And last time we played at League One level, we caused a few bloody noses to some of the bigger teams. We beat Southampton, Norwich, Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United. I remember a game against Sheffield United where Francois Zogo for us took apart Harry Maguire, which we may laugh at now, but Maguire was a big upcoming player at that point, and he just tore him apart for 90 minutes in that game. So it's we're capable of doing that. And Brunton Park, and when the crowd really gets behind the team, it can be not a fun place to play, because it's quite a tight enclosed stadium and it's an old school football ground. So it's kind of hoping we can, if we can get a good early start in this game, maybe we can cause a few problems.
Well, as you say that, I want your prediction, Lee. How do you see it going? What's your score prediction?
We are notoriously optimistic on our podcast when we do our predictions for each game. I'm not sure any of us have predicted a defeat yet. And I'm not going to change the habit of a lifetime. We're on a 3-game unbeaten run, albeit with a win and 2 draws. I'm going to predict we make it 4, and I think we're going to nick a win. I think 2-1. Callum Guy's going to score a long-range goal, of course he is, and probably Luke Plange with the other, just to rub it in a little bit extra. So, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win.
Oh, I like it. I'm going to flip it the other way, be boring. I'm going to say Derby 2-1 win. I think it'd be really tough. Like you've said, it's a tough place to go, and Derby aren't in the best form at the minute. And again, you've sort of picked up a few points recently, probably growing a little bit more confident in a new league. So I think it'll be a tight one. I'd like to hope Derby'd have the quality, but then this is Derby we're talking about. So you never ever know. But right, thank you so much to everyone for listening. Lee, it's been a real pleasure.
No problem.
If you've enjoyed, please do check out our other stuff. You can find us on Twitter, RamsTalkPods. You can find us on YouTube if you want to watch this with our lovely faces. You get to see exactly what we're thinking at every moment on YouTube's. That's RamsTalkPodcast. And we've had loads of good ratings on Spotify. We're edging closer to getting that 5-star rating overall back. So thank you everyone for the ratings. I really appreciate it. So let's hope for Derby's sake that we win in the weekend. I'm sure you'll disagree with me, Lee, but thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers.